What's the creepiest or scariest thing you've ever seen, but no one believes you? Part 2. I woke up to something. It sounded like a door shutting. At first, I thought it was a dream because I could hear it in the dream as I was waking up. Kind of like when someone calls your name when you're dreaming. But then, I looked at my cat. His hair was completely standing up, and he was beaming at my bedroom door. This was the moment when I got really scared because I know animals can pick up on that shit, and I thought he might know something's wrong. My cat doesn't do this type of thing unless a dog is in the room. So I looked over at the door, and the only way I can describe it is it looked like it was swaying slowly, like it was breathing, like someone was standing on the other side of it trying to hear if I was awake. This swaying was accompanied by a shadow. I don't mean a supernatural shadow, but it looked like a shadow of a person standing behind the door. I was paralyzed in fear. I lied there for 5 minutes, naked, watching this door sway. I considered yelling and trying to scare them away, but I was terrified someone might respond. I'd legitimately thought this was the moment where I will have to defend myself or be killed. I don't own a gun, but after 10 minutes or so, I mustered up the courage to check every room in the house. I fucking checked every corner too, but there was no one there. I don't know what happened, but my evolutionary traits kicked in, and I completely believed someone was outside my door. This might end up buried, but I'm going to add it anyway. I work night shift at a hospital, and during the nights, it's fairly common for us to run out of particular supplies that we need. During the day, there's normally a worker from Central Supply that you can call and they'll bring you up what you need directly to your floor. But at night, we don't have that luxury, so we often have to go down and get it ourselves. Central Supply is the basement of this hospital that has been around since the 40s, so it's creepy enough. I had heard stories about how creepy it was and people getting uneasy feelings while down there alone. I was naive and didn't really believe it until one night I had to go down there by myself. The place is huge and dimly lit, with rows of shelves of hospital supplies everywhere. I'm in the middle of these shelves looking for what I need when I just start to feel a shiver run through my entire body. The hair on my neck is standing up, and I just get this feeling of complete dread, like I'm not supposed to be there. Then, all of a sudden, I see this black figure dart past me out the corner of my eye. At first, I thought I was just seeing things because it's like 3 a.m. and I'm tired, so I brush it off. I go to leave, and suddenly I hear a huge crash behind me. A variety of supplies were wiped completely off the shelf and all over the floor, and in the corner of the room, I just see this black figure-like thing standing there. Every hair on my body is standing up at this point, and I get my ass out of that place as fast as possible. I came back to my floor, and all but one of my co-workers thought I was bluffing. The only one who believed me saw my face, and without saying anything, said to me, "You saw it too, didn't you?" Fishing on Lake Minnewanka in Banff National Park with a good friend, about 50 feet from shore. About 8:30 p.m. I see glowing red eyes up in the trees. Like red, like Predator, I guess. I do a double take. They're gone. I decide not to say anything. Maybe I'm tripping. Did I just smoke up? No. 5 minutes later, my buddy says, "I just seen some glowing red eyes up on top of those trees." I feel goosebumps. Yep, I saw them too. We look back and they're gone. We decide to aim the boat toward the shoreline. It's not dark yet, but the sun is going down. We saw nothing. No owls, no goats in the trails. We didn't get off the boat, but we had a good look around. When I ask him about it, this was around 10 years ago, he just says he doesn't want to talk about it. I can't blame him, but after all these years, I've never heard or seen anything like those glowing red eyes 30 to 40 feet up in the trees staring at us. I copy and pasted this next part, but I knew nothing about the history when we went fishing there. For more than 100 centuries, people hunted and camped along the original shores of Lake Minnewanka. The Stony people called it Miniwaki, or Lake of the Spirits. They respected and feared this lake for its resident spirits. The early Europeans called it Devil's Lake. I used to go camping there. I do not anymore, mostly because it's bear country for most of the summer, but yeah, also because of those bright red eyes. I will never forget that most surreal thing I've ever seen. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighbourhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out of the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going to work at night. That's when he kinda laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5-something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed that I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me the chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired. No one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 cause lights I'd had. No known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. Not quite sure how young I was at the time, but it was probably between 5 to 8. I was in my babysitter's bed at the time in her trailer park. It was 3 AM. I'd woken up because I had to pee. When I woke up, I looked down the hallway to see my babysitter leaning against the wall like one of those stereotypical cool guys do in movies. And I made eye contact and I felt my body go cold because she was still sound asleep next to me in bed. I went under the blankets to try and hide, and when I looked back, she was gone. I didn't want to sound crazy, so I've never told anyone. I just sat in her bed watching infomercials until 6 AM when she woke up. Never even thought about sleeping there again. I honestly forget how much this affected me until I started writing this. Really freaked me out, man. I was walking to class from the dining hall on my campus when I saw a lady yelling for help and banging on a window of a nearby building. Lots of people were walking past, but I was the only one who seemed to acknowledge it. I went to the window to help and she told me she was locked in a room in the building and that she needed me to come and open the door. Now, I have no idea the layout of this building and where she was located, so I decided to call campus security for help despite her pleading with me not to call them and just to let her out. I call them, and when I hear them coming, I go to greet them so I can take them to the window. I leave for maybe a maximum of 15 seconds, and when I return with campus security, she's gone. We can't see her at the window, and campus security goes inside to double check, and sure enough, there's no trace of her. Campus security definitely thought I was crazy, and I'm sure my professor thought I was full of shit when I explained to him why I was late. No one seems to believe that this happened, but I swear it did. Okay, so I was flicking through these and told my girlfriend about one, and she hit me up with all these stories. Just some background, she is a dedicated science brain and not superstitious at all. When she was growing up, 4 to 15 years of age, she would often wake up in the middle of a disturbed sleep to see an old woman perched at the end of her bed. This woman was not someone that she recognized. The old lady would soothe her back to sleep, often patting her feet at the end of the bed. The strange thing about this is her sister, a few years older, also had similar experiences seeing the old lady. They both shared a room, but would see her at different times. We doubt very much it was someone coming into their rooms at night. Both her and the sister also recalled seeing a man popping his head out from behind their tall kitchen cupboard, smiling, and then going back behind it. Turns out that from his description, the family believed it was a neighbour who passed away and used to play hide and seek with them and his children. Had my laptop in my bed just before going to sleep, not plugged in on battery. Made an offhand comment on some website about how I wasn't scared of ghosts and didn't believe in them. Then I turned it off and went to sleep with the laptop beside me in my bed. Next morning when I try to power it on, nothing happens. But the laptop feels unusually light. That's when I realized the battery had been physically removed and placed in the kitchen. I was alone in my apartment and do not have a history of sleepwalking at all. Not sure if this counts as creepy or overall scary, but it was weird. Back in high school, I lived in a large apartment complex. It was maybe around 8 to 9 at night and completely dark. I was with a group of friends, 4 or 5 people. We were just talking and messing around with a friend's pair of walkie-talkies as we decided to look up into the sky as 2 fireballs, or what can be described as fireballs, just appear in the sky and slowly move in a line. Just as that happened, we start getting what sounded like military communication over said walkie-talkies that was really static, but words came in every now and then. About 10 or so minutes later, the fireballs disappeared and the communication cut out. There was absolutely nothing about this on the news the next morning, and no one ever believed me.